And this morning's topic is service. And it's a very broad topic. And we here understand, in the overall course this trimester of being with Jesus, like Jesus, and doing like Jesus, that his entire existence is about service. Before creation, and certainly his time here on the earth, and his existence continues to be all about service, the sacrifices that he made and makes, and the service that he does for us. The more time we can spend on that intentionally, the better servants we're going to be. And I want to say this. This family at Lost River, I think, is full of dedicated servants. And we have leadership, our elders, our deacons, and many, many other men and women who are leaders. I believe we're chock full of people whose spirits are built around service. And so I feel like standing up here talking about service is a valuable exercise to do, but I'm talking to a family whose hearts and spirits are like that, and I realize that, and so I stand up here humbly this morning. This is a definition of service that's in the book we've been using, and I'll have quite a few more quotes this morning from that. There are a lot of really good thoughts in there that got me thinking, and I hope they'll do the same for us this morning. But this is a definition that was there. Service is a way of offering money, time, treasure, influence, and expertise for the care, protection, justice, and nurture of others. Acts of service give hands to the second greatest commandment, love your neighbor as yourself. And there's a lot packed in there with regard to those definitions of the things that we offer up for service, and the things, the benefits that we can offer because of our service: care, protection, justice, nurture. And again, there's words there with a lot of deep meaning, and I want to come back later on in the class and maybe talk about some of those specifically. Does that ring true? Does that definition, and we want to talk about maybe some specifics later on with regard to what we're talking about with regard to service.
Without service, you don't have a church.
I believe that's true. We're going to talk more about our ministry. Our showing Jesus to others is rooted in a very real way in our service and the world's perceptions of us as servants, not only of Jesus but to them. And we're going to be talking about both spiritual and physical service. And I don't want to separate those too much. We are spirit beings in a body, and trying to separate those things sometimes I think is more of a disservice. But I want to talk about those. And I talked about people whose nature and spirit it is to be servants. Again, if you look around the room, and if you know folks here, and as I get to know folks here, and people who've been in your lives, you can think of people for whom service is automatic. It's intrinsic in who they are. And when there's something to be done, there's no hesitation because of who they are. And that is a goal, and I think part of our including this in our discussion is to be intentional about it. Even if your nature is like that, and our nature is to be like that, but we're stopping and pulling back and saying, okay, how can I better that? How can I improve? Is my nature like it should be, even if I or others perceive that it's like that? I know I do sports analogies. I'm going to do one more. Who knows who Drew Brees is? Okay. A record-setting quarterback. Everyone knows Tom Brady. Drew Brees is in that echelon. His throwing motion was automatic, and it was precise, and it was perfect. And he worked on that to the point where he never had to think of it. They had a competition. They matched Drew Brees up against an Olympic archer, okay, at a not great distance. Drew Brees hit the target more than the archer did. Hit the bullseye more than the archer did, throwing a football. That's incredible. But there was a time during his career where he had a bit of an injury, injured an oblique, which is critical to your throwing motion. And he began to get into some bad habits that worked for a while, but then stopped working. He had to stop, pull back, reevaluate mentally and intentionally what his nature was, what his muscle memory was, to be able to get back to the being one of the most effective quarterbacks that have ever been. And that's, again, for me, in my mind, that is what we're doing here. Again, recognizing folks whose nature it is, but we want to be better about it. We want to encourage others to be better about it, and doing that together is what we're doing. And I think that's what this whole class has been about. Love your neighbor as yourself. Another quote: the Christian discipline of service is one of the most important ways, and I modified that, one of the most important ways the world discovers the love of God. Again, I want to ask you, does that ring true? We're to teach the Word, and we're to preach the Word, and we're to be a force in the world. But does that make sense? And maybe flip it around. If we claim to be children of God and followers of Jesus Christ, and we are not servants in a very real way, how is our ministry going to be?
It's not going to be.
It's not going to be. I think that's well put. It's not going to be. So focusing on becoming better servants. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later too. There's all different kinds of service. We're going to talk about some details about that. But one of the distinctions you can make is there are some times when service is called for, and it needs to be immediate. Okay? And I think we all know of people whose natures are to run towards the gunfire, so to speak. And there are some people who are just like that. There are some people who have maybe become like that. And that's wonderful. There are other people who are much better and maybe super strong at being involved in the long, down and dirty, extended service that needs to be offered to people in a very maybe long-term uncomfortable way. And so service can look a lot of ways. And some are good at doing it in one way, some in another, and some work to become better at the ways they aren't. But as a family of God, and it's another one of the things I see so much here at Lost River, is that people work together to amplify their strengths and to help cover their weaknesses to meet needs of the people we come in contact with. And you can kind of figure out for yourself which of those kinds of ways you fit in and work towards improving. There's lots of scriptures that are I think explicitly about this. Proverbs says, "Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due." And we could talk about the to whom it is due part and make that a question and spend a lot of time on that. But it says, "When it is in your power to act." And that's not meant to be an incriminating thing, but have you ever felt, or maybe in retrospect, determined that you had the power to act and did not? And how did that feel? How in retrospect did that not just feel, but what kind of effect did it have on the folks who needed the service and yourself? But this is powerful language here that I believe describes or incites in us understanding the depths of the responsibility that we have in this regard. When it is in your power to act, that's broad. Okay? Especially in our country, in our situation, in our time, there's very few situations where we don't have some power to act with regard to interpersonal relationships and opportunities for service. Deep, and it can be a difficult responsibility. I also want to mention, it may come up again a little bit later, but is prioritization important with regard to service? And if so, tell me what I'm thinking about why. Well, how can prioritization be purposeful? Let me ask it another way. Is it possible we can be dedicated servants and get the priorities wrong, and how does that look? Yes, sir. Justin, you.
That's okay.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you have to be intentional, otherwise you get wrapped up in your own busyness and what you need to do. So that's, taking your mind off yourself and on God's will and the needs of other people.
Yeah, so that touches on motivation, and we'll come back to that too. Very, very important. Yes, ma'am.
I think sometimes we can get so involved in serving others that we forget to serve those in our household.
Ah, there you go.
That we forget that we have those responsibilities, and we have things that we need to be doing within our own household, within our own families. That we want to be out doing good for others, we forget to do good with our family.
I think that is can be a real danger. Where we get so caught up in that world and that part of that duty that we don't look around us, especially with regard to our families, our wives, our children, and where we can be extremely involved in the world. And some of that comes back to motivation too. Why am I doing what I'm doing? When you are able to serve someone in a real way and see them benefit from that and maybe even receive gratitude, that feels good, right? I think that's the purpose. But we can get caught up in that and possibly even recognition for service. But God, we make commitments in our lives, godly commitments, and God gives us the responsibilities that comes with those commitments. And so part of being a worthy servant is honoring those commitments and making them the priority and being intentional about who and when and how we are to serve. And sometimes that maybe even goes against a little bit of what's become our nature in serving. But I believe that's critical.
I don't know of anything that requires more judgment than service, because you alluded to it earlier, but in the scripture, it's almost always in our power to act to a certain extent. And this has to do with priorities too. That's another good version of priorities that she said earlier. But also it's like, who do you help? I mean, there's so many opportunities to help the way our society is right now with our socioeconomic ways. And so, really to be forthright, you're trying to help who's going to be the most return for the kingdom. You're going to invest your time, to be blunt, I mean, it could be a colossal waste of time, when there's no return to it whatsoever for the kingdom. So it takes a tremendous amount of judgment to do so. I know I've blown it, invested time with the wrong people, and again, it's not a colossal waste of time what it does for you internally. It's always good in that sense, but you can spend a lot of time, a lot of money, and then there's just no change whatsoever. So that's another version of priority in my mind.
And that can weigh heavily. I think it's very important to say also, we do have a responsibility to be as wise as we can with all of those resources that we mentioned earlier. Having said that, are we always going to get it right? I mean, if it's our judgment, are we going to?
Not even close.
Not even close. And who is our trust in? If we are working to become godly servants, our trust is not. Our trust should not be in our own abilities and spirits. It should be in God's. And we use the resources, we spend the resources He gave us and trust Him to run with that. We come right back. Yes, ma'am.
Speaking to that, there are a lot of good things out there, but we are called to choose that which is better. And sometimes when I try to weigh it, I'm like, okay, yes, that's good, but whether it's my time or my money, my efforts, which is the better thing that I need to be focused on?
With wealth comes choices. Wealth of time, money, all the things we have. And with comes choices. Again, part of being a good disciple is doing the best we can, being intentional about it, and then trusting God in the ways that we use His wealth. Yes, Jamie.
I think I heard this on a podcast, but I might have heard it here. So if it's repeating, that's okay. But I heard that calling is where your passion intersects with another's need. And I think that's been helpful for me to think about because calling can feel really mysterious, like where am I being called to help, or, we might give too much weight to that. But if there's something that I am passionate and I see it about and I see a need that passion could fill, that probably is a nudge that I might be the person to fill that need. And there are so many of us with so many different gifts and passions that there's probably someone who can fill every need. So maybe we can be intentional in asking for wisdom in growing those passions and those talents, and that will help direct us where our service should be.
So calling is where your passion meets someone's needs. Yeah. And relationships are a big part of it too. There's some need that I've come across that I just can't fill. If we have relationships like we're intended to have among our family, we're going to be able to go and say, who do I know? Who has that ability and that heart to serve? And how can that need be met? Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to try to say this the right way. So when we're thinking about service, and I'm thinking about my role as a woman, as a wife, sometimes women are just behind the scenes, or a lot of times, behind the scenes servants. And I would encourage the women to embrace that role. We don't get a lot of accolades a lot of times. We're the support, we're the wingman to whoever it is in our life, whether it be our husband, our friend, whatever it is. I know for us, Brett is out in the community constantly, and so that he can do his service, I'm the wingman. I'm the support at home. I do the things that he doesn't have time to do right now. So I would encourage, especially the women, to embrace that.
I'm sorry if there's not the accolades that should be.
No, it's fine. I'm just saying, it's good. It's a good thing.
It is. And your point is very valid, but men, I know men here will give full credit to the wives. Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
In Galatians 6:10, this kind of helps me a little bit. So then as we have opportunity to do good, an opportunity is like twofold. You know about it, and you have the ability to do something about it. So as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially those to the household of faith. And therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially those in the family of faith. So that can kind of help you if you're limited on your time and your resources, who gets what first, if that makes sense.
Well, it goes back to that prioritization responsibility, part of the responsibility, absolutely. Some other verses similar, in similar vein, Hebrews says, and do not forget to do good and to share with others, for, and there's going to be a series of verses here that talk to this, for with such sacrifices, God is pleased. I'm grateful for things like this that provide clarity about something that pleases God our Father. When you're young and you know something that makes your dad happy and you can do it, that's a good thing. And we're told that this pleases God. So it's a fantastic clarity about that. We've mentioned a couple of times motivations, but this says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Doesn't mean God and others can't benefit from something you do out of selfishness. But this says we are to do it in humility. In humility, value others above yourselves. Not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of the others. How critical is that concept to a life of service? Not just recognizing needs in others, but actually valuing others above yourselves. Now, I know people who are like this. I know way more than my share in my family and other places who I can see when they're doing things, I can tell that it's because of this. They are valuing others more than themselves, more than their money, more than their time. And so that's an explicit instruction about that. Jim, did you have anything?
Now, we may forget sometimes how important motivation is. When we help people, even if our motive is bad, they get help. But 1 Corinthians 13 is still shocking. I mean shocking when it says you can give your body to be burned, and if you have not love, then it doesn't count for anything. That's a passage that, if that doesn't get to us, I don't know of a passage that can, to tell us the power and the importance of our motivation in service.
Yes, absolutely. And value, like I said, that valuing yourself and then valuing others above that is a critical component to being able to do that. Ever have any problems with that?
But you have to be able to value yourself in order to do it for others.
Absolutely. We have to understand the value that God places on us. That can, we talk about mental illness where that element is missing, and that can very much affect our service. But absolutely, God places value on us, and if we discount that, we're in danger also. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So if you go back to that value question, would anybody posit that you're more valuable than Jesus to Christ, the Son of God? No, I don't think any of us would say that, but do you think he valued you above his own value? Yes, he did. And he didn't come to be served, but he came to serve. That's powerful. If we can get just a glimpse of his nature in that regard, we're going to be more motivated, I think, to become better servants. Whoever, I'm sorry, yes.
I was going to say, sometimes we feel like service has to be a big grand act. It has to be a big something that we do. It could be something as small as, you know, my mom lives in assisted living, and she loves to have her fingernails painted. And, you know, every time I go, I give her a manicure and paint her fingernails, and that makes her so happy. It could be such a small act versus something big and grand. And it doesn't have to be something you spend a lot of money on. It doesn't have to be something that you give a lot of time to. And I think also sometimes we think that we have to do it for others, meaning others outside of our family. You know, whereas serving our parents, serving our grandparents, raking leaves, doing small chores for them, dropping by the grocery store once a week and making sure they have what they want. If they love coffee creamer, making sure they always have coffee creamer in their refrigerator. Things like that, we tend to overlook. Those are acts of service as well.
Absolutely.
And taking care of our family and taking care of our loved ones, that is serving. And I think that sometimes we want to look out and be like, oh, I have to be a member of the 9/11 fund and do all that. I mean,
Sure.
those are not bad things, but there's lots of ways, little ways that we can serve, even within our family, within our church family, within our community, volunteering to go read at school. I mean, there's lots of things that can be done that are smaller.
Well, if anybody who's been involved in or around caring for elderly or dementia folks, you understand those little things. You can start things that maybe caught you off guard that are just deep moments of service. Absolutely. And there's a lot of folks involved in that you'll never ever know. Yes, ma'am.
Well, and that brings up another word that we can add here to motivation and to service, but it's the opportunity. And it's twofold. We have an opportunity to receive service from others, and we have to be humble and open to that. When we have a bad moment, we have to be the brother or sister that accepts that. And that's hard. That's really hard.
Now you've gone too far.
I know. Trust me, I'm aware. But we have an opportunity. This isn't something just that we're commanded to do. We have an opportunity to do it. It's a very positive thing. And so I catch myself, it's language that I've been working on for a while, I catch myself, well, I have to. No, I don't. I don't have to. I am honored to be able to do something for someone else. And I have to catch that in my own brain. Well, I have to do this, and I have to do this, and I have to clean the kitchen. I don't have to go help somebody else. That is my opportunity that God has given to me and that Jesus modeled. But Jesus also accepted love from others. And so we have to be ready on both sides of that. All of us are, you know, at some point in our lives, Lori's going to be coming and paint my nails in this. And I'm going to say, thank you, ma'am.
Well, that's next level. And it is. It's not something I've included. It reminds me, I have a really good friend who his wife has multiple sclerosis, and he's consumed with working and taking care of her, and he always, Grant, what can I do for you? Can I help you with such and such? And I'll say no, and he says, don't steal my blessing. And he says, don't steal my blessing by not letting him help. And so that's next level hard. Yes, ma'am.
I want to piggyback on what she said, because I was sitting here wondering if I should say it. And I have girlfriends that will serve, like one of them feels like she has to take a meal every time someone's sick. And she's super stressed out at home. And I'm like, there's other people that can do it today.
Yes.
It doesn't have, you know, this is a huge church, this is not in this church, but I'm sure that happens, you know, where you feel like you're overwhelmed, and maybe that's the time you need to focus on your own family and let someone else serve. And so doing it because I want to is different than I have to.
Well, and there's another level of opportunity there. Somebody said this years ago, and I hear it now, I can't remember. But looking to serve the servants. Looking for those people who are spent and maybe convincing them to let someone help. So that's another way of thinking. You're looking for those servants and serving them.
Sometimes, Grant, I believe the Lord interrupts something I intend to do. I've got someone I go to serve and to help, and he interrupts that with something else. And I can't put that aside. I can't act as though, well, no, I'm going to go over here and do this. He'll allow me to do that if I'll take care of what he's interrupted me with. I think of Jesus in that regard. Remember the time that the man came to Jesus and wanted his girl to be healed. She was dying. And Jesus was interrupted. And I think this is his humanity, which is my example. His humanity was interrupted by the woman coming and touching his garment. And so he gave her attention on his way to do something else.
Well, I think that goes back to something we touched on earlier, humility. I think that can be about humility.
That's right.
My will may need to be subverted.
That's right.
And so that's why it's explicitly talked about with regard to service, I believe.
And it's those little things that are really important. Like Jesus says, a cup of water. Well, that seems small, but it's still important to the Lord and to that person that needs it.
The thirsty person, yes.
Yeah.
A couple of scriptures here that are striking to me. Whoever is kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done. And we can look at the reward part of that, but lending to the Lord. And let's read this next one too. This part of Matthew 25 has got lots of power in it, but it says, the last part of that section says, "Truly I tell you, whatever you do for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Okay, so lends to the Lord, and doing this, you do this for the King. Do you know people who are complete service, completely have it together, need nothing, but maybe you are given an opportunity to do something for that person that they really need? I can think of people like that where I thought, how in the world, that person needs nothing, and I was given an opportunity to do something for them.
You need to be gracious enough to accept it.
They do, yeah, but the opportunity to do that for them, you have an opportunity to lend to the Lord and to do something for Him, our Lord. And that is by doing to these who, he says, if you do it to them, what might be a glimpse of that we have? Okay, again. Parents. When somebody does something for your child, and maybe it's something you couldn't do or didn't expect, how do you take that? Be thankful, grateful, but you take it as doing it for you. You know, if you do something for my child, you've done it for me. And that's the way our Father is when we do something for His children. And I think that's an important glimpse into how He views our service to others, not just looking down and saying, that's good for y'all to do that for each other, but you're doing that for me. So an opportunity, for us to have an opportunity to do something for Jesus, if that doesn't motivate us, I don't know that we can be motivated.
I think it's in Hebrews where he talks about not to neglect or forget to be hospitable or entertain strangers, because it might be that stranger is an angel.
Right.
And you're unaware of it.
Right. Bypassing an opportunity, that could be the case. Another quote from the book says, God intends to bless the nations through us and our lives of service. Christians are the very presence of God to others. We become God's vehicle of blessings on planet Earth. we understand God's not limited to our ability or our actions, our decisions. But does that ring true, given these scriptures we've been reading, that we can be the very presence of God and of Jesus, his Son, to others? That should be both weighty, a little bit intimidating, but it should also empower us to, when we're presented with some option, some opportunity, especially when we feel inadequate or feel scared or maybe not sure how to go about it. We can be the very presence of God, and that means he's going to be behind us when we're doing that. Don't let fear cripple us, and don't let it prevent us from being the presence of God to people, to those around us. Impediments. If we harbor hatred that breeds neglect of any of God's people, we are hindering the Spirit of Jesus. Are we powerful enough to hinder the Spirit of Jesus? I think we would say no, but in his intentional plan for us to be the presence of God and to be him and to be his ambassadors, we have the potential to hinder his will. I think another couple of important elements. We will never, this goes to valuing others higher than ourselves, the scripture we looked at earlier. But we will never really serve others unless we see that the needs of our neighbors are as real and as important as our own. Ever struggle with that? I mean, I've got this thing that I know I need, and it can be over-consuming, but their needs are just as real and just as important as mine. And that goes to this. Service is rooted in seeing others as God does. So to that point about seeing others' needs as real as ours, how does God view that? This concept can affect so many things. Very hard to do. When you're furious at someone who just, whether it's somebody immediately in front of you or somebody in the world, you're furious at them and they deserve for you to be furious at them. And our spirit can be affected by that. How does God view that person? Okay. Another way to put that around is how did God view me when I was that person? Or when other people perceive me as that person? Okay, so if we can ever get just the smallest, minuscule, minimal way of doing that, our lives of service, our lives of forgiveness and grace and mercy towards others is going to be greatly amplified. How does God view this person in front of me? But specifically with regard to service and the opportunities that come our way, how does God view those people? And so those two things, I think, can be critical. Making sure we view others' needs as important as ours, and working to be able to see others as God sees them. People in need, deeply hurt or in deep need, sometimes trying to care for others. Those are going to motivate us to be better servants. Yes, sir.
Something that's really changed my attitude, and honestly, I used to almost get annoyed. I seem to have this sign on me that says, "Please come ask me for help." But I heard something sometime, and the realization really changed my life, is that you may be the answer to someone's prayer. You know, and honestly, I did get annoyed people asking for help, but I might be the only opportunity of someone to help them, and maybe God sent me because he knew I would help.
Yes, sir. Frank, last word.
Well, how do we see other people like God does? Well, that's just another way of saying becoming more Christ-like. He said, love one another even as I have loved you. So as I become more Christ-like, it's just natural to want to see others as God sees.
That takes work and practice, constant work and practice, doesn't it, to be able to do that. Thank you very, very much.